Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guests, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the gift of life, the gift of a child, the gift of a lifetime, the gift of this gift from God, the gift of a breath, a heart, a soul, a living human being. We aimlessly go through life, having children, fostering children, children growing up, becoming a child, becoming an adult, and we think these are all parts of life that just plain happen. We just kind of aimlessly fall into them. They show up for us, and we just kind of go along with the flow, so to speak. We believe it is part of life. It is what should happen, will happen, and is always going to show up for us. What happens when the time that we are not able to have children, something happens and we may lose our children? We may lose a spouse. We may have a shift in a relationship, or things in our life may just go, oh, this isn't working out for me. Perhaps the clock in the sky is ticking much faster, and my body is not recognizing it, and things are not working out. Today we're going to be talking about both sides of the paradigm. My guest today is Clay Romero. His book is The Child. So what we will talk about is, yes, that perfect moment in time when a child's sense enters the soul and enters the spirit to become the physical child we hold. But also, too, what happens when that is not in the cards for us, when that doesn't show up for us? How do we work out our life, navigate our days, and reflect back on God's love for us? Clay, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jeanette. This is a real treat for me, and I look forward to our conversations.
I'm so glad to have you today, Clay, with your book, The Child, because as I read your bio first, you're about the author sheet, and I said, oh, goodness, he's had a lot of things that maybe perhaps as we as humans would say we have a loss of, but yet you turned around and wrote a beautiful book, The Child, of your poems and through a child's lifetime, and you were actually giving a gift. So I think in a way, you really, truly didn't feel all of that heartache and pain to live from it all the time. You still could feel that gift. Do you think?
Yes. I certainly wanted to do my best to write a letter to my child, to give him love and advice and guidance so that maybe their life will be better too. I know that there's so many parts of life that happen even before conception, so I thought, well, I'd better start there. Because if those things don't happen, well, the child will never be, and I want that child to be very, very much.
Do you think perhaps, Clay, that we kind of miss so much of the conceptual time of how a birth actually occurs, and you have so many poems in your book, so that when we miss all of those spots, we're like, oh, goodness, we just think of the end product, and we miss all of the joy and the mystery and magic of life.
Well, that's certainly true. I know for many people, they just automatically assume that they're going to be having children, and it's an easy thing and all that. But for me, that just didn't happen. And so I still look forward to having children. I have virtually no relatives named Romero that are related to me, and so it was something I thought was quite important. At one time, after I'd written the poem, I thought to myself, I hope someday maybe I will have some children, because I don't want to end up like that man that I saw in the convalescent home who's sitting in a wheelchair, and he's unhappy that his children had forgotten to visit him for the past 2 weeks. Now, for me, I don't want to be that guy, because I know that my children will not have forgotten about me. They won't be visiting me because they simply don't exist.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you think perhaps sometimes the loss, the pain, and the suffering of not having children has made many changes in your life, but it hasn't erased your love of children, or your love of people, or your love from God?
Well, it is a thing where I certainly do look forward to having children someday. I know that time is getting somewhat less at this point. I know that for certainly American culture, having children at my particular age is very, very, very minimal. Most women, justifiably, they want to go out with men that are their own age. Well, I enjoy that too, and I certainly want to get together with people that are my own age because we have perhaps more in common. But I'm also aware that, well, women my age, they're probably not going to be having children with me. So I just try to do the best I can. I hope that I come across somebody that will hold the same values and qualities that I love and enjoy. And I don't know, maybe I can still have children, but I know the window is closing, and I would certainly like them to be able to, I would like my child to enjoy a happy life too.
Your book, Clay, The Child, what you really did is take us from absolutely the potential of possible birth. You take it right to the beginning with the sperm in the beginning of the book, the very first poem. Perhaps sometimes do you think that in your essence you might be able to touch into that and say, how are children born, and how can I step into that process to give it life?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I know for practical matters that it's an impossibility, but it's only maybe a wish, a love, to reach out and tell that person that is yet to be how much they're loved, and perhaps to give them guidance so as they can ultimately come to the point where we can look upon one another with our own eyes.
Right, because I think sometimes so many people will say, but I wish for it, I pray for it, I hope for it. But perhaps sometimes you have to step in the realization and manifest your child's story as you have in this book. I think this book, The Child, is all about manifesting your child's lifetime from actual conception all the way through until they become an adult and having a child of their own. So sometimes if we can manifest that story, we can feel and open our hearts. Sometimes, people turn around and have children then after getting to that point. Others, it opens up their story and their heart even more. And whatever gifts come to you, then you're ready, maybe?
Yeah, that's true. I certainly want to see things continue on with the family. I think it's extremely important. A family is certainly the center of many people's daily lives. I certainly have much reverence to God for how I feel about such things, and I want to do my very best to take good care of my family, to protect them, to bring them into a life that hopefully will be as nice as I could possibly make it, without actually coddling them, because I know very well that there does need to be some amount of hardship in order to appreciate the good times when they do eventually arrive.
Can you tell us, Clay, about your poems? How did you create or conceive of writing a poem about each step of a child's life? Because sometimes people will say, well, I want to write a story, and it's like 10 pages for each chapter, and you're kind of going on and on and on and on and on. You wrote some beautiful words in your poems that are very simple. They're concise, but they're very heartfelt. What made you start to write the poems?
Well, it actually came about because, this goes back many years. In 1992, I was already aware that there was no other, family with my name going on, and I knew how important it was to have children. I was the man that put together a family tree for my family, and so I had a pretty good idea, and I noticed that there was an absence of people named Romero. It's a wide variety of circumstances, but the nearest crossover link from me as a Romero to the other Romeros I'm related to was somebody born in 1875. So with that, I knew that having children would probably be a very important thing to do. So before I was married, I spoke to my wife-to-be at the time about how important this was to me, and if it was within her like to do so, her love to do so, I would greatly appreciate it. And she agreed and said that would be just fine, and look forward to having 3 or 4 children. So certainly at that time, when we were married in 1994, I was very, very happy about that, and glad that I had a wonderful woman that would help me fulfill this, along with so many other things that go along with life. However, after we'd been married for about 5 years, well, it doesn't look like we're going to have children the old-fashioned way, and I was rather put out by it, but I thought, well, maybe we can adopt, and we were able to adopt one small boy at birth, of which I'm grateful. But as time went on, I would ask about, maybe adopting another, or raising more children, this sort of thing. And my wife was basically putting me off and sidestepping the issue repeatedly. So after 16 years of marriage after that, I finally said, I need to know what's going on here. And so from that conversation, and this was already in 2016, I learned 3 important things. She did not want to adopt any children. She didn't want to be a mother or raise children. And because of medical complications, even before we were married, she couldn't have had children in the first place. And I thought, I feel very deceived here. Do you think you could have told me about this before we were married? I would have very much appreciated this. And but that's how it shook out. And so in August of 2016, I came into my shop as a machinist, and I was about to run the next part, and I'm in tears. I'm very upset. And so I thought, maybe I should write a letter to my child. I mean, what else could I possibly do at this point? Right. And so I write some very good poetry, and so I decided that I would go ahead and, start at the beginning. Where does it start? Well, it starts, there's sperm swimming in the void. And so I started there. And the first words seemed fairly natural. Go forth, my child. And that's where I started. I certainly wanted to do what I could, and in about 4 hours, I wrote out about 27 5-line stanzas to my child that would, certainly at that point, I didn't think would ever be. And I went and showed the text that I wrote to some friends of mine. They're an older couple in their 70s, and they looked at it and they said, "Clay, this is beautiful. Why don't you publish this? If you're ever going to publish anything, publish this. This is really good. People need to hear this."
Absolutely.
And so I thought, well, I was a little surprised, but I went back and I wrote out more stanzas and made sure I had a stanza for each year of the child's life. But when I started getting out near the end of the poem, I realized that there's a certain point that the child will grow up and probably have his own child. And at that point, I think that's when the father's advice and love probably should not necessarily end, but take a back seat, because the child is now a grown man and it's up to him to make his own decisions. And so that's where I left off with it. But I certainly tried to touch on all those simple yet important things that happen in a child's life. Certainly from being born,
right,
to being going to school for the first time. Simple things like laying there with your parents and looking up at the clouds and imagining what you see. When Christmas rolls around, when Thanksgiving comes along, the things that are certainly parts of most people's lives as they grow up. And then after I'd written out, I think it was 45 stanzas or thereabouts, I would have people come into my shop periodically that they needed help with machine work of one kind or another, and I would show them the text of what I wrote and ask them what they thought about it. And probably the vast majority, 95% or greater, said that they felt very touched. It was interesting in that many of the responses I received was people saying, this causes me to think about my own life, where I'm going with it, what has happened.
Right.
Some people grew up with a very, very harsh life. There was one man that grew up in the inner city where crime was rampant. Gunshots could be heard at night. And he said, if only I grew up in a place that was so good.
Okay.
This is something I hadn't really counted upon. I hadn't really imagined.
Right.
But I guess there's a certain point where we do need to define or somehow describe, at least to the people that we love, children, young children included, as to what I would like to see for you, what I would like to see go very, very well for you, that maybe you could have a very nice life too. I also had one man that was well into his 70s that read my poem, and I noticed that he became very silent, and he put it down. And I said, Jack, what did you think? And he said to me, well, actually, he was having trouble talking to me because he was all choked up. Because, again, it was something that he ended up thinking about his own life as well. But when he did talk, he said, Clay, my God, that's beautiful. How I wish things could be so nice.
Yeah. I think, Clay, what your book is truly about is about saying, what are the gifts of our life? How can we remember the steps in our children's lives, so reflect back on them, and perhaps maybe find the love going through? Just as you shared, a lot of people have had not very good lives. But your book, by sharing joy and love, it's not negating what their life was all about, or telling them they got to miss something or it's grief. It's not negating or anything. It's like perhaps triggering them to share their own story. I think sometimes people want to be able to share their story, but they're afraid to, or they don't have anyone to actually sit and listen to them. This book, The Child, is not just for maybe new parents or young adults. It's definitely also for the elderly. I mean, I would take this book easily and go into a nursing home, an assisted living facility, or those where people are chronically ill, and read it, maybe even just 1 or 2 pages, and say, what do you think? How did your story play out in your life? And what it's doing then is opening up the door to connect with other people. So your book is not about saying what you missed. It's saying, let's tell your story. And that's what we all want to hear is, everyone tell your stories and open up your hearts. Because right now we're at a place where people don't want to hear your story if it doesn't do something for them. You know what I mean? That kind of idea.
Yeah.
It's all, what are you going to do for me? Kind of idea. But in essence, if you use this book as a tool to help others open their hearts, be prepared, because what comes out is emotions, feelings, repressed memories, and things that they weren't able to share with anyone else. They didn't have anyone to trust. So your book, The Child, is about gaining trust and unconditional love in the world. So you are giving a gift, even though you may not have children of your own right now.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving a gift to everyone to say, let's connect to who we are. And that's what you're asking each other, perhaps?
Yes. It is perhaps something that I had not anticipated, because I know it started out as a letter to my child. But the actual effect that resulted is exactly that. It is causing people to open up and talk about, well, this is how my life was. Right. As I say those words, I was thinking back on my own grandfather, and I'm sure that most of us have done something similar in our own lives. And this is where the 10-year-old child talks to his grandfather and says, Grandpa, what were you doing when you were my age?
Right.
And now for my own grandfather, he grew up in Mexico, and it was during the Civil War that was going on there, roughly 1910, 1911. And he told me about how he was hiding underneath the house because there was a war going on. And when he came out from underneath the house, he saw a man that would take a body of someone that had been killed, and he would drag it over and throw it on the fire. Now, as a 10-year-old, this is a pretty unsettling image to imagine.
Yes.
I said, Grandpa, I think it's better in the United States. He said, yes, it is, Clay.
Yes.
And so I was very grateful.
Do you think perhaps he showed you the actual gift of life, or he wanted to show you that life is a gift?
Yes, he most certainly did, because certainly at that time his life was in grave danger of ending, because it would be very, very easy for just trying to make something on the wood stove in the house, and maybe a bullet would go through the window and hit you, and it could very easily end your life.
Right.
Yeah. So it was a very precarious time for him. I know that there was another thing that my grandfather told me that I remembered that was kind of an interesting thing. He'd went outside of the country, much later in life. I think it was into the 1960s, and him and my grandmother, they went somewhere, and then they came back into the United States. And when he came back to the United States, he said that as he was coming through the port in the United States, he said he saw the United States flag and how beautiful it was. And when I heard him say that, I as a young child, I thought, well, yeah, the American flag is a beautiful thing. It's got red and white. It has red and white stripes and has a blue background with stars on it. Yes, it's a beautiful flag. It wasn't until I had went outside of the country and I saw how other people lived. I was visiting in the Philippines, and I saw real poverty. Right. I saw real human, suffering. And I know that the world out there can be a very, very tough place. But for the most part, most of what goes on in the United States is generally nicer. And so when I came back into the port of San Francisco and I saw the U.S. flag, the words of my grandfather came back, and I knew what he meant. So I'm feeling very, very fortunate that, at least, my life has generally been pretty good. I had a very nice upbringing. My parents were quite good, and I want to see if I can do something similar, at least as best as I can, because I know there's no perfect parents, but I'll try to do the best I can.
I think also, too, the idea is that everyone has a story of what we've gone through in this lifetime. Be it hard, yes. Be it great, be it wonderful, be it in our dreams, perhaps be it just something we've thought about or we wish for, or maybe something that we've prayed for. However, time does tick by. But try to be, I think the book is more of all of the poems throughout it are like, when the child might hurt his arm, we would say, oh, I remember a time when I was hurt, and this is what happened. So if you think about the time you were hurt in your life and what had happened, you say, I would like to help others not be hurt, or I'd like to help others to heal, or, that's how you end up with doctors and stuff, So I think a lot of the times the things that happen to us are stepping stones to bring out a very deep emotion inside of us to learn, like compassion or caring or understanding or truly unconditionally being there for someone. Perhaps?
Yeah. I did have one interesting thing. You mentioned about, people's dreams and this sort of thing.
Yes. I
did have a very interesting dream that flavored my life. I was 22 at the time. I was having a dream, and in my dream, I woke up. Now, of course, I was still dreaming, but in my dream, I woke up like I was in the morning, and I noticed that my hearing seemed muffled, and my vision was not clear. And every time I moved, it hurt. It just seemed to be like I was sick, but not exactly.
Right.
And as I got up and I, walked over and I went into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror, I saw myself. And I was 85 years old.
Wow.
I had gray hair. I had wrinkles. I was bald on my top, on the top of my head, just like my father was. And I noticed that, I thought I was 22 years old. How did I get here so quickly? And so I realized at that point that even when you see people that are very, very old, I always remember they're just a 22-year-old person, but they're in a body that doesn't want to work very well.
Right.
And they are still the same person, albeit much, much wiser because they've had a lot of, life experience, to really flavor how they later turned out. But they did have the same characteristics, the same mannerisms, the same everything, because all those things are pretty well cemented into place by the time you're 22.
Right.
And so I don't see old people as old people anymore.
Yeah. Well, you and I are both up in age. Right, because you and I are both up in age. I'm almost 70 myself. And when I look at it, when I was just playing with my grandchildren over the weekend, it was like I can't move around as well as, maneuver as well as I used to. And I could still dream and want to put on my shoes and go jogging. But walking to my mailbox right now is kind of a challenge. So in my mind and in my thoughts, it's two different things. However, I can just close my eyes and just feel the breeze when I'm running or jogging, or the air and smell the leaves and the trees. So I think we
Yes.
still have the capability to jump into that story and to be present with the feelings that exercise might bring us, even though we might not be having it. So I think truly your book about the child, you stepped into the moment of having a child and how this is like you would like to walk them through life, the experiences you would have with them, even if it isn't the action that you're physically performing at this time.
Yeah. You know, just at the moment, if you'll excuse me, I can kind of feel the emotion rolling out the corner of my eye and rolling down my...
Yes, that's what we wish to bring. You wish to bring that to everyone. You want that feeling, and that's what you're feeling now, is what you want others to feel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I certainly want that others could be so... could recognize the love that so many people out there that they're just so much by themselves, and how they look forward to seeing the family continue on. Yeah.
Do you think perhaps your mission of writing the book is to let others know that we have so much unconditional love to give? Because you are stored up right now with so much unconditional love to give, you're about ready to burst.
I would say that's very, very accurate. Yeah, I certainly want other people to realize the love they have and don't keep it bottled up. I mean, love is such a wonderful thing, but it's only good when you give it away.
Clay, in closing, do you think that perhaps your mission is for others to recognize the love of life?
Yes. I certainly hope that people will look at life not as a number or looked at so cavalierly, but that all life is very, very important. And that they should be able to give to others that last small devotion that lets other people know how really, truly wonderful they are. Because in the end, the vast majority of people are very, very good. Right. And I think it's worthwhile to let people know that very thing. They're very good, and they're not forgotten, and they're loved.
Yes, I have shared over the decade many times that people are seeking to be loved, cared for, and heard. I think that's the human story as we can look at it in retrospect. And even if it's only a glimpse for a moment, that story will stick with you, and you will hold it in your heart as if it's the wallpaper in the room, because I think, don't you think that is truly our purpose in a way right now?
Yeah, it is. I know for my book, it's I didn't really plan it this way, I guess, but it ended up being a poetic circle of life.
Yes.
Because it is the type of thing where it's so hard to imagine quite what's going to happen when I started, but when I was writing it, it just simply flowed. This is my heart, and I would like to give that to my child, to let them know how much they're loved. And as it turned out, other people identified with that too, and how really important that is. And I certainly want to encourage other people to reach out to others, to know that no matter what our station in life is, that it's important to to be able to connect with other people and to hear what their story is.
Yes. And I think also, too, you'd like for parents, as in reflection, to maybe jot down and write a story to their children and to leave that as their legacy instead of sometimes all of this kind of outside fluff that they may have seen. Perhaps let them into your heart, let them into your soul, and even if it's a short book, just like yours, or writing poems or stories, share that with your children before, you're not able to do that.
That is my one of my greater wishes that I hope would come about, is that people would in fact do exactly that. Please, tell your family that you love them. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. I'm very aware of this sort of thing. Like, as a young man, I used to think, well, saying I love you is kind of a sissy thing to do. Well, it's not. It absolutely is not. And I kind of learned about this as my own parents have passed on, and I miss them very much. Sometimes I think, gee, I've got this really wonderful thing that just came up. I need to tell my mother, but I can't. But what I did do, certainly when my mother and my father were alive, is I remembered to tell them that I loved them. And that's a gift that costs nothing.
Yes.
But is so important for other people to know.
And I think it's also, too, for young parents to also do that. Because when you turn around and you're able to project that story and you're sharing it, let's say something eventually happens in life, and the kids will say, well, I never knew that, or I never know that might be their thoughts. Or for the parents to write the story and share it with their children, for whatever reason, life takes a lot of curves. We fall off the edge. We leave too early. We end up hitting many walls. But if this has already been written down and shared with others and having that deep discussion, I think the only goal that it does is it opens up your heart. And that's what we want, is people to have more open hearts and to see the love from each other. And if story is the way it needs to be, so be it. Poems, maybe just a few sketches on a piece of paper. Maybe just sit down with a date book and say, I want to fill this with all my thoughts and my dreams, and leave it behind. It's whatever you need to open your heart to share with another to open theirs. That's the goal of your work, yes?
Yes. I think that would be very, very helpful. And I think if everybody did that, the world would be a much, much nicer place too.
Yes.
Yeah. And that would be just a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'm certainly very, very grateful for all the good things that come my way, and I count my blessings. I don't forget those things.
Yeah.
Because I know that, well, there's a lot of things that happen in life that are very, very difficult, and we just try to do the best we can with what we have at the time and make everything hopefully work as nice as we know. And these are things that all ultimately come from people's hearts to make everything work as nice as they can too. I so hope this would be a very common theme for a lot of people, at least hearing my voice, to write down your thoughts, to put together a story as I have. You'll be glad you did.
Absolutely. Well, Clay, it was a pleasure to have you with us here today. Can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work? That would be wonderful.
Well, to my knowledge, my book, it's currently available on Amazon. I've been finding it was actually available in different countries. although I don't think it will ever be something that I could convert into a different language. Otherwise, the rhyme and the rhythm of it would completely be lost. But the story is still the same, though. To my knowledge, I think Amazon is about the only place I've ever seen it.
Awesome.
I've heard from the publisher iUniverse that it's available at Barnes and Noble, but it probably by special order, because my book is not well known at this point. But I think as time goes on, people will find a great deal of appreciation of it, and it will probably get to be much more well known. I imagine that it will probably be a very, very good gift that would come about, say, at baby showers or weddings or similar family gatherings, this type of thing.
Yes.
But I do hope that more people at least will be able to read it and to understand it, and maybe take it upon themselves to do something similar. I think it's the right thing to do, and for their families, it would be a beautiful thing to be able to leave for their children.
Absolutely. And you know what I love about the book, too, Clay, is that there's a lot of white space around each page. The pages are large, and I think that's wonderful. Yes. And what I like people to do is to make it a living document. As you read the page and something comes to you, take out your ink pen and write in the book. Put the date and initial it. And then what happens is you say, oh, I remember this day, and write a little story in it. If anything, that's something that can be left to the side table, and a family member can read it, and maybe then it helps them pass along the stories that they also have within the family. So it's as if it is a living legacy book, perhaps?
Yes. Thank you so much for suggesting that, because that is very appropriate for it. Because I know that as people are reading through this, I'm finding that people are remembering things about their own lives, and they really should be written down, so as it's something that can be passed along for other people to enjoy some years later. That's something I want to keep in mind. I think that would be a wonderful, wonderful thing to do, and I appreciate that very, very thoughtful and helpful suggestion.
Yeah, I always love that. Right, because I say to always put the date and always initial it. Because sometimes, let's say if you're reading this book to an elder in a nursing home or something, take your pen with you and write down what they say on each story and leave it with them, And then someone may come along to visit them, and they will pick up the book and go, oh, you shared this story, especially those in memory care places, because you never know what they may say one day to the next. And it's truly just absolutely wonderful. Yeah,
that's really very true. I could even picture people taking maybe a small picture and pasting it in the book of something that reminded them. I know for a lot of people that are in care homes and their mind is not working well, sometimes it's very helpful if they have a picture where they can look at it. And underneath the picture, it'll say something like, "This is my child.
Yeah.
This is my wife or my husband or my cousin or whatever." This way, even if their mind is not working that well, at least they can look at a picture and know that, oh, yeah, I remember who this is.
Absolutely. So I think truly, Clay, what you had written initially as a book from your own source of your own heart is truly an expanded gift to the world in how to utilize your work and your words as a gift to the world.
Yeah. It's something that I didn't quite realize at the time, but I'm so glad that it is working out the way it is, because it's something I think is very necessary, and I think a story like this, well, my story, don't know of anything that's been written like this before, and I think for people to do something similar in their own lives would be a wonderful thing to pass on to future generations, and for people to ponder the things that they did in their youth, and hopefully having a wonderful, wonderful life.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you so much for being with us today, Clay, to share your open heart, and it was such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy talking with you as well.
If you'd like more,
do have a pleasant day.
Thank you. If you'd like to find out more information about Clay Romero, again, the book is The Child, please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to be able to check it out on Amazon. And it is available today, and it is absolutely a wonderful gift, I would say, for almost anyone. You know, we have these things that we write down sometimes. We have a lot of pictures on our phone, and we tell a story, and it flies by. Time, it just has wings. It's just exponentially flying by like crazy. So if you can pick up his book, The Child, and write down your own story within the pages, and perhaps leave it behind. Leave it on a desk. Leave it in a drawer. Maybe share it with your young grandchildren, or perhaps maybe even with your spouse or someone else that you're telling a story, or even a caregiver. This is my story. I would love to share it. Would you like to listen? That's why we read books. So we thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a wonderful day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr-jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.